Thanks for joining us on episode 1672 of the Inspired Stewardship Podcast.
I am Lindsay Stadel. I challenge you to invest in yourself, invest in others, develop your influence, and impact the world by using your time, your talent, and your treasures to live out your calling. Having the ability to find your resilience is key. And one way to be inspired to do that is to listen to this, the Inspired Stewardship Podcast with my friend Scott Mater. Another challenge that I think is that many people don't recognize how much their internal dialogue affects their mental health. I would talk so bad about myself in my own head, and it just made me worse and worse.
Welcome, and thank you for joining us on the Inspired Stewardship Podcast. If you truly desire to become the person who God wants you to be, then you must learn to use your time, your talent, and your treasures for your true calling. In the Inspired Stewardship Podcast, you will learn to invest in yourself, invest in others, and develop your influence so that you can impact the world.
In today's podcast episode, I interview Lindsay Stadel. I asked Lindsay about her journey through the challenges she's had around mental health. Lindsay also shares with you why she wrote her books to share what you can do about your own mental health. And I also asked Lindsay about how she's discovering her calling through these struggles. I have a great book that's been out for a while now called Inspired Living. Assemble the puzzle of your calling by mastering your time, your talent, and your treasures. You can find out more about that book over at inspiredlivingbook.com. It'll take you to a page where there's information and you can sign up to get some mailings about it as well as purchase a copy there. I'd love to see you get a copy and share with me how it impacted your world. Lindsay Stadel is a devoted wife, mother, and grandmother, and a highly successful entrepreneur. She manages 4 thriving businesses, but beyond her business accomplishments, Lindsay is deeply committed to mental health advocacy, driven by her personal experiences with suicide and overcoming mental health struggles. Her mission is to support others battling mental health issues and suicidal tendencies. As an award-winning author, she uses her voice and writing to address these important topics, and she is now speaking publicly to help fight the stigma around suicide. Lindsay's journey reflects resilience, compassion, and a dedication to making a positive impact on others. She's had 4 books: Born to Risk, The Giving Book, Volume 5, Focus, and Life's Checkmark. Welcome to the show, Lindsay.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I look forward to our conversation today. So I shared a little bit in the intro about some of the work you do, number of businesses that you have, books you've written, and now you're speaking and work that you're doing around working on the stigma surrounding suicide. And as a suicide attempt survivor myself, I've got some echoes to this. Folks on the podcast have heard some of my story before, but I was looking forward to having you on. But before we go there, let's kind of go back in time and tell people the story of what has brought you to the point where this is the work that you're doing, that you feel called to do, the message you feel called to put out in the world.
Okay, sure. My journey, my life has not always been a straight line. It's been full of highs and lows, heartbreaks, healings, but ultimately it's been full of a lot of purpose. I am today so much more than I ever thought I would be. I'm a wife, a mom, and a grandma of 3 with a 4th on the way. I'm an entrepreneur and an author, which I never thought I would be, and a speaker. But but before any of those titles, I was a woman who had hit my breaking point. After my divorce and a series, of course, of painful life experiences, I had reached a moment where the weight of everything felt unbearable. And that was when I attempted to take my own life. That moment really became the turning point of my story. And because of that, I chose to commit myself to a mental health facility. That decision there began the process of rebuilding my life and myself from the inside out. It really forced me to confront the things that I often avoided, my own thoughts, my own pain, my identity, and even my worth. I felt like I was worthless. And since then, my life has been about transformation. I like to think of myself as a transformer because I started as one thing and now I'm another. I've helped build 2 businesses from the ground up and continuously build our 2 other businesses. All 4 of them are thriving. I've rebuilt relationships with my now husband and his 2 boys, that the relationship with them after my breakdown was non-existent. And I've even discovered that the hardest chapter of my life, it became the very message that someone else needs to survive. That message is that you are enough. And you don't have to please everybody. You have to take care of yourself, mind, body, and spirit. So because of that, I speak and I write, I tell my story because I want people to know something that I had to learn the hard way, that you are enough. You don't have to prove anything to anybody. You don't have to pretend. You just have to be you.
So a lot of times, I've shared my story of at least some of the things I was going through that had me considering suicide and what kind of turned it around. And you use the word, the weight of everything. And I think folks, that word probably resonates with folks because there is a lot of weight that we feel to our emotions, to our situation. Maybe it's money problems, maybe it's relationship problems, whatever it is, it's different for different people, but we feel that weight. My question for you is it today that your life, that the weight of it's different, or is it the way that you view the weight, if that makes sense, that's different? What changed to get you to where you are now?
I really think the way that I view the weight, my life was so out of control and I was not me. I knew who I was supposed to be and I was not that person. And so everything that I was dealing with back then, if it were to happen to me now, I would react completely different. Everything in my life would prevent me from going down that deep, dark hole. And so the weight of all of the life experiences that I was faced with in 2017, definitely it's a different weight. And I can get through the stress. I can get through the heartache. I can get through the anxiety and depression now, where I couldn't back then because it was just too heavy. And I viewed it completely different.
Talk a little bit. One of the things I like to highlight on the show is what I call the intersection between our faith journey and our life journey and what that looks like for us. How has what you've gone through and the way that your views have changed, how is that part of it? How has that part of it played out for you?
That part is completely different for me. I was raised in a very Catholic family. We went to school to Sunday school every Sunday. We went to church every Sunday. We had the Wednesday night CCD class, religious ed class. And once I became old enough to make my decision on whether or not I was going to go to church or not, I quit going. Once I became a teenager, I was given that option and I quit going. And my entire adult life, I'm spiritual, but I've never really had a faith journey. And for me, faith became real when my life stopped being easy. And that would have been in 2016, really, when I got divorced. There were seasons in my life prior to that where I really felt completely broken and alone. And those moments were when my faith stopped being something theoretical and became something personal. I had to learn how to live life without my father. I had to learn how to live life as a single mom. And when I was at my lowest point, of course, I didn't have all the answers, and nobody would have all the answers for me. But I did have moments where I felt carried and moments where hope actually did show up, even when I didn't think that there was any hope to give. So for me, faith isn't about perfection. It's about surrender. I had to trust that even the most painful parts of my story can be redeemed.
Yeah, I think for a lot of folks, it's interesting because when we go through challenges, sometimes it turns us towards faith and sometimes it turns us away from it. That we can be angry or we can surrender. Again, as you use that word, and surrender to a lot of people sounds negative, but it's not, not
Right.
in this case. So that was part of what turned you around. What do you see as some of the major challenges for folks around mental health? There's a listener out here right now that has thought about or is thinking about suicide. There are folks that are dealing with very real challenges. What are some of the major things that prevent or block the healthy work that we need to do around mental health and mental wellness?
I think the two biggest challenges are silence and stigma. For so long, people have been taught to hide their struggles, not to talk about them. We don't share, just, don't say a word. And we say things to people like, just be strong, push through. Why can't you get over it?
Pull yourself up by your bootstraps.
Exactly. And those kind of phrases, honestly, I was told those phrases when I was going through my difficult times, and it just made me feel more alone and made me want to hide more. And another challenge that I think is that many people don't recognize how much their internal dialogue affects their mental health. I would talk so bad about myself in my own head, and it just made me worse and worse. And so our thoughts shape our behavior. At least that's what I think. And our behavior shapes our mood. And that's why I have what's called a TBM framework. It stands for talk, behavior, mood. The way we talk to ourselves matter. The way we talk to ourselves affects the way we behave. Our behavior matters, and our behavior affects our mood. And of course, your mood matters. Mental health isn't just about crisis moments. It's about daily conversations that we have with ourselves and support systems that we create around us. So that's why the TBM framework that I talk about quite often is really big for me, because they go hand in hand.
Yeah, I've actually talked to people before about that inner voice. And my question first is, do you have it? And everyone's hand goes up, of course. We all talk to ourselves. And then I ask, okay, how many, keep your hand up if that voice is nice to you. And nearly every, very seldom in a group of people does any hand stay up. And if any do, it's only one or two, but the vast majority put their hand down. And the truth is, a lot of times we talk to ourselves in a way that if someone talked to someone we cared about and loved in that way, them's fighting words. We're going to have a discussion. You're not talking to my son, daughter, wife, husband, mother, whatever, people that you care about that way. And yet we'll do that to ourselves. Why do you think
100%.
we get into that pattern? Yeah. Where does it come from?
I really think that you are your hardest critic. And when you hear other people saying similar things to you, it becomes very easy to believe it. So then it's hard for you to get those thoughts about yourself out of your head until you can prove to yourself that you're not worthless, or until someone can prove to you that you're not worthless to them, I think is why we get stuck in those situations of treating us. You're going to treat yourself worse. 9 times out of 10, you're going to treat yourself worse than someone else will treat you. And you just need that one person to help you snap your brain back into thinking good things about yourself for it to turn around.
And again, that gets back to why having the support systems around and others who are brave enough to talk about the untalkable. We don't talk about that. Why not?
Exactly.
Again, shame, stigma, all those other things. It's interesting because every time I've told my story of, the financial difficulties my wife and I were going through, how I was suicidal because of finances, people, and I tell it it's just part of my journey. And people are always like, wow, you tell that. So, thank you so much. That's so brave. That's so vulnerable. And I'm going, but why? It's just part of my journey. What is, I get it, but at the same time, I don't get it.
I understand
have you had a
that
similar
too.
experience?
Yes, all the time. Oh, you're so brave. Thank you for sharing your story. I don't think of myself as brave for sharing my story because it's my story. Yes, it took some bravery at the very beginning for me to start sharing it, but I don't share it now for sympathy. I share it now to help others who are in the same space that I was in. So yeah, I don't find bravery or strength when I share my story. It's just a conversation between me and someone else, sharing with them my darkest moment and hoping that they're not ever there.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's just, I think part of it is the culture we have now, and I call it the Instagram culture. And the reason why I call it that is because, when you want the Instagram selfie, you make sure you frame the shot just right. And immediately out of frame is a pile of dirty laundry 6 feet high. But make sure that's not in the shot, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's like everyone wants to share only the good parts of their life, not the challenging parts. And then we go around believing, well, I'm the only one who has challenges. Everyone else, it must be easy. And which is completely not true.
Right.
But it's the belief that we have because of it. So I know you've also written some books and working on a new one and been featured in several books and things. I believe the first one was called Born to Risk. Tell me a little bit about that experience. Why did you feel called to put things, it's one thing to be a speaker about it and to share your story, but why did you decide to write the book?
My Aunt Annie, which people may know her as Tish McDaniel, she is one of my biggest cheerleaders. We have had our ups and downs, of course, my entire adult life, but she has always been in my corner. And so after my suicide attempt and years went past, she got a hold of me one day and she says, Lindsay, I need you to meet someone. He published my story because she was in a near fatal vehicle accident in 1993 or 94. And she said, I think your story would fit well in his book. So the book is called Born to Risk. It's about stories of survival. And it asks you the question of what is your biggest risk that turned into your greatest reward. And so she introduced me to Emilio Roman and his beautiful wife, Daniela. And Emilio and Daniela will always be part of my redemption story, because if it wasn't for them believing that my story could change people, I wouldn't be talking to you today, Scott. I wouldn't have started to share it. So I told them basically my story in a nutshell. They loved it. They wanted to have me part of their book. So I began the writing process, which I never had even considered putting pen to paper. And I was so very scared. There's a whole 24-hour time period right after I jumped to the time that I woke up in the hospital that I don't remember. I know people. My husband remembers it. My daughter remembers it, but I don't. And I don't ask them about it because for me, that's my brain's way of telling me that I don't need to remember it. Something very traumatic happened during that time. And I know I died that night. I did, but I came back. And so my brain's blocking everything else out. So when he asked me to be part of his book, I jumped at the opportunity, and I'm so very thankful that I did, because my shame from that day has disappeared. Yes, I am. I feel shame that I put my kids through what I put them through. I'm regretful that I did that because I don't have a working left arm. I live with constant pain all day, every day because of an injury that I received from the attempt. But the life that I have now is so much more than I would have ever expected to have. And because of sharing my story and getting comfortable in my own skin, am I able to quit hiding from my past, and I own it. And that's why I decided to start writing it down and sharing it with people. And now I've got 3 published anthologies, and I'm in another one that's coming up that'll be published in June. I've been on multiple podcasts, and I'm going to say I'm proud of myself. I don't give myself recognition very often. As humans, we don't give ourselves recognition. But when my vulnerability was able to create connection with other people, that's when I decided that it was time for me to start being proud of myself and what I put myself through and what I lived through. So my story really isn't just about survival. It's about transformation. And if even just one person reads my story and decides to keep going, then sharing my story was 100% worth it.
Yeah. By the way, I'm just going to call this out. First off, you mentioned you were nervous, you were scared about sharing your story that first time. but you shared it anyway. That is actually the definition of bravery. Because bravery is not the absence of fear. It's feeling fear, but doing something anyway. And I say that for you, but probably for me too, that, I think sometimes because we make it part of our journey, we forget, there is some bravery involved in sharing it. And again, I think that even if it's not something like a suicide attempt, even if it's a different kind of vulnerability that people are called to share from their own journey, it's sharing the low points as well as the high points does require a certain amount of acceptance of the risk of that. Because let's face it, not everybody's nice about receiving that.
Yeah. I was very worried about what people were going to think about me, what people were going to think about my family, and what kind of new stigma might be out there against myself or my husband's family, because, my husband was with me the night that I jumped. He wasn't my husband back then. He was my best friend, but I put them through a lot. And what are people going to think about him and his family accepting me back into their lives? But my husband and I decided when we got back together late 2017 that it was going to be him and I against the world, and they were going to either accept us for us or they weren't going to be part of our lives. Honestly, Scott, I'm the third oldest of 9 kids, and I don't have a relationship with any of my siblings. I only have a relationship with 2, let me take that back, 1 of my 6 parents. One of them is deceased. So, I do have a relationship with him, and I only have a relationship with 2 of my aunts, and there's multiple. So my entire family, I would say 95% of my entire family has been shut out of my life because they were toxic and they did not receive me well after I started sharing my journey. So they weren't there for me in my tough times. So now they don't get to be there for me in my great times.
Yeah. So I've got a few questions that I like to ask all of my guests. But before I ask you those, what else about the work you do or the message that you put out do you feel called to share?
One thing that's really important to me is that work is bigger than just a book. My mission really is to help people understand that their worth and that they are worthy of love and of life, and help them realize that their story still has value, even if it's unfinished, messy, or chaos. Through my speaking and writing and sharing my experiences, I hope to create spaces for people that it will help them feel safe to talk about things that we often keep hidden. Because the truth is, healing really begins the moment when we realize we're not alone. And so that's why I created my Facebook group, for people to be able to go out there and have a safe space to share their story or to read about other people's story and know that they're not going to be criticized for it or be made fun of or looked down upon, because we're all there for the same reason. We're all there to help each other and to live through and to share our experiences.
So my brand is Inspired Stewardship, and I run things through the lens of stewardship. And yet I've discovered over the years that that's one of those words that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So for you, what does the word stewardship mean to you?
To me, it means recognizing that gifts and experiences and opportunities that we've been given aren't just for us. They're also meant to serve others. For a long time, I felt like parts of my story were things that I should hide, especially the suicide attempt. But stewardship challenged me to see my experiences differently. And it asked me the question of, what is the hardest thing you've been through that is actually something that you were meant to use to help someone else? And so the hardest thing that I've been through, my greatest risk, was jumping out of the truck that night. But my greatest reward and the thing that is meant to help others is the fact that I decided to live. So that shift changed everything for me. And now I can see my story and my voice and even the struggles that I've had and the struggles that I continue to have as something that I've been entrusted with and something that I can use to hopefully encourage and uplift others.
So this is my favorite question that I like to ask everybody. Imagine for a moment that I invented this magic machine. And with this machine, I was able to take you from where you are today and transport you into the future, maybe 150, maybe 250 years. But through the power of this machine, you were able to look back and see your entire life, see all of the connections, see all of the ripples, see all of the impacts you've left. What impact do you hope you've left in the world?
I hope that when people think about my life, they don't just remember my shortcomings, that they remember my accomplishments and, if any, impact that my accomplishments had, not just on them, but on all of my loved ones. I hope that people feel seen and heard by sharing their story, and hope that they feel valued because of something that I shared. If someone today chose to stay, chose to keep fighting, or chose to believe in themselves again because of my story, that would mean everything. So 100, 150 years from now, if there was even just 2 people, that were here because of my story, that is success. And success to me is not measured by recognition. Like I said before, I don't tell my story to get sympathy. I don't share my story for the recognition. I share my story because I think success is measured by the lives we touch. And I want to touch as many lives as possible. And so if my life helped someone realize that they are enough, then I know that I lived my life with purpose.
So what's on the roadmap? What's coming next as you continue on this journey?
Right now, I'm kind of taking a little bit of a break because I did have a surgery at the end of December 25 that got rid of my intense, extreme, everyday, all day long nerve pain that I have been suffering from ever since my attempt. I have what's called a brachial plexus injury. That means that my nerves from my left arm were violently torn from my spinal column. So when I had that surgery, it got rid of that intense pain, but it caused a few other health issues. So at the moment, I'm taking just a small break, but I'm still continuing to expand my mission. And that includes speaking. I can speak from home, so I don't have to worry about things like that. I do still continue to write because I want to continue to put my story in more books. I would like to eventually write my own book one day. And that's going to mean I'm going to have to face that 24 hours that I know that I don't remember. And that's going to be one of the hardest things that I've done since deciding to live. But I know that I'm going to have to face that 24 hours at some point. And so I also am creating resources or trying to help create resources for people to understand their worth and to help navigate their own journeys. But I'm also passionate about reaching younger generations and helping them build resilience, because both of my kids have had mental health struggles, and I want to be able to go to a school and talk to high school kids and help them realize that just because your boyfriend or girlfriend broke up with you, or you got a bad grade on a test or whatever, that doesn't mean that your life's over. It just is another speed bump that you can get over. And I want to help them build resilience and healthy internal dialogue early in their lives. But at the heart of everything that I do, Scott, the message is the same, that no matter where someone is in their story, it's not over, and there is still purpose ahead of them.
You can find out more about Lindsay over at lindsaystadel.com. I'll have a link to that over in the show notes as well, of course. Lindsay, is there anything else you'd like to share with the listener?
Just that here on my shirt that I'm wearing today, I know you can't see it. It has my logo. It says, "You are enough." And on the back, it has my quote, "You are enough. No more proving, no more pretending, just unapologetically you."
You are.
Thanks so much for listening to the Inspired Stewardship podcast. As a subscriber and listener, we challenge you to not just sit back and passively listen, but act on what you've heard and find a way to live your calling. If you enjoyed this episode, please do us a favor. Go over to inspiredstewardship.com/iTunes rate, all one word, iTunes rate. It'll take you through how to leave a rating and review and how to make sure you're subscribed to the podcast so that you can get every episode as it comes out in your feed. Until next time, invest your time, your talent, and your treasures. Develop your influence and impact the world.